He thought he was about to entertain a crowd, but he had no idea he was stepping into the fastest defeat of his entire career. Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's story, I'd really appreciate your support. Take a quick moment to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. It's completely free and helps us keep bringing you more powerful and emotional content. Also, I'd love to know where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thanks so much for being here. The marble floors of the Manhattan Chess Club reflected the glow of overhead chandeliers as cameras adjusted their angles, capturing every polished surface, every expensive suit, every subtle gesture of prestige. At the center of it all stood Victor Hale, a grandmaster whose reputation stretched far beyond the city, a man who had defeated champions, crushed prodigies, and built a career on making others look small. Tonight was no different. Or at least, that's what he believed. A live audience surrounded him, some seated, others standing shoulder to shoulder, their murmurs blending into a low hum of anticipation. This wasn't just a match, it was a performance. Victor thrived on that. His tailored navy suit, his measured posture, the slight curve of his smile, it all projected control, authority, superiority. He scanned the room slowly, deliberately, searching not for a challenge, but for someone he could dismantle quickly, someone who would reinforce exactly why he was who he was. And then, his eyes landed on her. Emily Carter stood near the edge of the room, almost blending into the background. A simple gray sweater, dark jeans, no attempt to stand out. She wasn't talking, wasn't moving, just quietly observing the board from a distance. To most people, she was invisible. To Victor, she was perfect. An easy win, a harmless distraction, a moment of light entertainment for the crowd. His smile sharpened as he raised a hand slightly, drawing attention. "You," he called out, his voice smooth but unmistakably condescending. "Would you like to play a quick game?" Heads turned instantly. A few people exchanged glances. Some smirked. Others chuckled under their breath. The unspoken assumption spread quickly through the room. This was going to be quick. Embarrassingly quick. Emily hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then stepped forward. Her movements were calm, unhurried, almost detached from the energy around her. She didn't smile. She didn't protest. She simply walked toward the board as if she had already accepted something no one else understood yet. Victor gestured toward the chair across from him with exaggerated politeness. "Don't worry," he added lightly, loud enough for the nearby audience to hear. "I'll keep it simple." A ripple of laughter followed. The room leaned in. Phones lifted. Cameras focused. This was the moment they came for. Emily sat down, her eyes settling on the chessboard. No nerves. No hesitation. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that didn't belong in a room like this. Victor noticed it, but dismissed it just as quickly. Confidence often looked like that before it was broken. He reached forward, adjusting a pawn with casual precision, the opening move already forming in his mind. Around them, the room began to quiet. Conversations faded. Even the subtle clinking of glasses seemed to pause. Something in the air shifted, though no one could quite explain why. Victor leaned back slightly, completely at ease, completely certain of what was about to happen. Across from him, Emily's fingers hovered just above the board, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. And in that moment, before a single piece had truly changed the game, the entire room unknowingly held its breath. Victor barely glanced at her as he completed his opening move, his fingers moving with the effortless confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times under far greater pressure than this quiet room could ever offer. To him, this was not a match. It was a demonstration, a reminder to everyone watching of the gap between mastery and mediocrity. Emily responded immediately. No hesitation, no visible calculation, just a smooth, precise movement that placed her piece exactly where it needed to be. A few people in the crowd exchanged amused looks. Quick moves like that usually meant one of two things, either boldness without understanding or confidence built on something deeper. Most assumed the first. Victor leaned back slightly, studying the board for a brief moment before making his second move, this time with a faint smirk returning to his lips. He was already setting a trap, a subtle sequence that had dismantled far more experienced opponents. The kind of setup that looked harmless until it was too late. Emily's eyes followed. The movement, calm and steady, as if she had seen it before. Again, she moved without delay. Second move. Clean. Direct. No wasted motion. The murmurs around the room softened just a little. Not gone, but quieter. Victor's fingers paused for the first time, just for a fraction of a second, before continuing. It was nothing noticeable to most, but to those who understood the game, even the smallest hesitation carried weight. He adjusted his position slightly, leaning forward now, his attention narrowing. Third move. This one sharper, more deliberate. A subtle escalation. The kind of move that quietly signaled control. Emily answered just as quickly. Third move. And this time, something shifted. It was not obvious, not dramatic, but it was there. The energy in the room tightened. Conversation stopped entirely. Even those who had been casually watching now leaned in just a little closer. Victor's eyes narrowed as he studied the board more carefully. The pattern was not unfolding the way he expected. Not incorrectly, not chaotically, but differently. Too clean. Too efficient. He reached for his next piece, slower now, his confidence still intact, but no longer effortless. Fourth move. A stronger play, designed to reclaim control, to push the tempo back into his hands. The kind of move that usually forced opponents into hesitation. Emily did not hesitate. Fourth move. Immediate. Precise. And now, unmistakable. A quiet tension spread across the room, like a ripple moving through still water. One man near the back lowered his phone slightly, his expression shifting from amusement to curiosity. Another leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the board. Victor felt it now. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. The kind that comes when something does not behave the way it should. His gaze moved quickly across the pieces, recalculating, searching for the flaw, the oversight, the inevitable mistake that would restore order. But the mistake was not there. Emily sat exactly as she had from the beginning, her posture unchanged, her expression unreadable, her hands resting lightly near the edge of the table. No tension, no urgency, just stillness. Victor inhaled slowly, his confidence now sharpening into focus rather than ease. He made his fifth move, this time with full intention, committing to a line that had secured victories against players far more seasoned than the woman sitting across from him. It was a decisive move. A statement. The room held its breath. And for the first time since the match began, Victor did not look at the crowd. He looked only at her. Emily's eyes dropped briefly to the board, scanning it in a single, fluid motion. Then, without a word, without a pause, she reached forward and made her fifth move. The piece landed softly against the board, and in that quiet sound, something irreversible settled into place. The moment her fifth move settled onto the board, the illusion shattered. Victor did not speak. He did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the position in front of him, scanning, recalculating, searching for something that no longer existed. An escape. A counter. A mistake. But there was none. The pattern was complete. Clean. Unavoidable. Around them, the room seemed to collapse into silence. The kind of silence that carried weight, that pressed against the air and made even the smallest movement feel loud. A man near the front leaned forward slowly, his brows tightening as realization dawned. Another exhaled under his breath, barely audible, as if afraid to disturb what had just unfolded. Victor's hand hovered above the board, fingers slightly curled, frozen between instinct and disbelief. This was not possible. Not like this. Not in 5 moves. His mind raced backward, replaying each decision, each position, each assumption he had made from the very beginning. He had not been careless. He had not been distracted. He had played as he always did, controlled, precise, dominant. And yet, every move had led him here. Every move had been anticipated. He finally looked up at her, really looked this time, as if seeing her for the first time. The quiet woman in the gray sweater. The one he had chosen because she looked easy, harmless, replaceable. Emily met his gaze without expression, her eyes steady, unshaken, carrying none of the triumph he expected and none of the hesitation he had hoped for. Just certainty. Victor swallowed slowly, the confidence that had filled the room moments ago now gone, replaced by something colder, something unfamiliar. He lowered his hand, placing it gently against the table instead of the board, as if even touching the pieces now would confirm what he was not ready to accept. A faint whisper moved through the crowd, then another, Then silence again, thicker this time, heavier. Someone in the back murmured, that is checkmate, barely above a breath. The words seemed to hang in the air, waiting to be acknowledged. Victor's jaw tightened. He looked down once more, tracing the lines, the angles, the inevitability of it all. There it was. No defense. No continuation. No way out. The truth, simple and absolute. His king was trapped. For a long moment, he said nothing. The cameras continued to record. The audience did not move. Time itself seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something almost unreal. Then, finally, his voice broke through, quieter than anyone had ever heard it. Checkmate. The word left his lips with difficulty, as if it carried more than just the end of a game. It carried the collapse of certainty, a shift in something deeper. He leaned back slightly, the movement lacking the controlled elegance he had displayed before, his posture no longer commanding but uncertain, searching. "Who are you?" he asked, the question no longer laced with amusement, no longer part of a performance, but something genuine, something almost urgent. Emily did not answer immediately. She glanced once more at the board, as if confirming what had already been decided long before the final move was made. Then she looked back at him, her expression calm, almost distant, as if this moment meant far less to her than it did to everyone else in the room. Her voice, when it came, was soft, steady, and completely without emphasis. "I just play." And with that, she reached forward, gently straightened a single piece that had shifted slightly during the match, and leaned back into her chair. No celebration. No acknowledgement of the stunned faces around her. No need to explain. The room remained silent, but it was no longer the same silence as before. This one carried understanding. Not fully formed, not complete, but undeniable. Something had just happened that none of them could ignore. Something that did not fit the story they had expected when this began. And as Victor sat there, still staring at the board, one realization settled quietly into place, heavier than any defeat he had ever experienced. He had not just lost a game. He had misjudged the person sitting across from him. Completely. The silence did not break right away. It lingered, stretching across the room like something fragile that no one wanted to disturb. Victor remained seated, his eyes still fixed on the board, but the intensity had changed. It was no longer calculation. It was reflection. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about how to win. He was trying to understand how he had already lost. Around them, the audience began to shift, slowly, cautiously, as if movement itself required permission. A few people exchanged glances, their earlier amusement replaced by something far more serious. Respect, confusion, curiosity. One man in a tailored suit leaned toward his companion and whispered something under his breath, his tone no longer mocking but measured, almost careful. Another picked up his phone again, but this time not to record a spectacle, but to capture evidence of something unexpected, something rare. Emily sat quietly, her hands resting lightly in her lap, her posture unchanged. She did not look at the crowd. She did not look at the cameras. She did not even look at Victor anymore. It was as if, for her, the moment had already passed. As if the outcome had never been in doubt. Victor finally leaned back further in his chair, exhaling slowly, his composure attempting to rebuild itself piece by piece. He adjusted his jacket slightly, a subtle gesture, but one that revealed more than he intended. The control he once held so effortlessly was no longer complete. His gaze lifted again, scanning the room, and for the first time, he noticed something different in the faces around him. No one was laughing. No one was smiling. The energy had shifted entirely. He turned back to Emily, studying her more carefully now, searching for clues he had missed before. Her appearance had not changed. The same simple gray sweater. The same quiet presence. But now, those details meant something different. They no longer suggested weakness. They suggested something else entirely. Restraint. Choice. "You have played before," Victor said, his voice steadier now, though still quieter than before. It was not a question. It was an acknowledgement. Emily did not respond immediately. Her gaze moved briefly across the room, taking in the crowd that had once overlooked her. Then, she looked back at the board, her expression thoughtful, almost distant. "A little," she replied softly. The understatement settled into the room with surprising weight. A few people let out faint breaths, almost involuntary, as if they had been holding them without realizing it. Victor gave a slight nod, processing her answer, though it raised far more questions than it resolved. A little. 5 moves. Checkmate. The pieces did not align. Not in any world he understood. He leaned forward again, this time not with dominance, but with intent. Curiosity had replaced certainty. Would you mind? He began carefully, choosing his words with more precision than before. Another game? The question hung in the air, and this time, there was no laughter. No assumptions. Only anticipation. Emily looked at him for a moment, her eyes steady, measuring, as if considering something far beyond the request itself. Then, she gave a small nod. If you would like, she said. The simplicity of her answer carried no challenge, no pride, no hesitation. Just agreement. Victor reached forward, resetting the pieces himself, each movement slower, more deliberate than before. The sound of wood against the board echoed softly in the quiet room. Around them, the audience leaned in once more, but the energy had transformed. This was no longer entertainment. This was something else. Something that demanded attention. As the final piece was placed, Victor paused for a brief moment, his hand resting lightly on the table. He looked up at Emily again, and this time, there was no trace of the earlier condescension in his eyes. Only focus, respect, beginning to form. The game had changed, and deep down, he knew it had never been what he thought it was. Victor did not rush this time. As the pieces were reset and aligned with quiet precision, his movements carried a different weight, slower, more deliberate, as if each small action required thought. The room sensed it immediately. This was no longer a performance. This was a test. He glanced once more at Emily, not with dismissal, but with focus sharpened by something unfamiliar to him in this setting. Uncertainty. White or black? He asked, his voice calm, controlled, but stripped of its earlier edge. Emily looked at the board briefly, then back at him. Black is fine, she said softly. Victor nodded, taking white without another word. He placed his hand on the first pawn, but paused for just a moment, his eyes scanning the board as if trying to see beyond the obvious. Then he made his move. This time, it was not casual. It was intentional, calculated. A solid, classical opening, one that left no room for early traps or shortcuts. Around them, the audience leaned in closer, the earlier murmurs now replaced with a focused silence that felt almost heavy. Emily responded, again without hesitation, her piece sliding into place with quiet certainty. No flourish, no delay, just clarity. The rhythm of the game began to build, but it was different now. Each move carried tension. Each decision felt observed, measured, significant. Victor's second move came faster than the first, but still controlled, his confidence rebuilding in a more cautious form. He was no longer playing to impress. He was playing to understand. Emily mirrored him. Second move. Precise. Balanced. Nothing excessive. Nothing wasted. The board began to evolve, pieces shifting into positions that spoke a language only a few in the room fully understood, but everyone could feel. Victor leaned forward slightly, his attention narrowing completely, shutting out the cameras, the audience, the room itself. There was only the board now. Only the pattern. Third move. Strong. Structured. A quiet assertion of control. Emily's reply came instantly. Third move. And again, that subtle tension returned, threading through the air like a warning no one could quite name. Victor's eyes flickered, scanning the position, his mind moving faster now, deeper, testing lines, predicting outcomes. He was no longer assuming. He was calculating. Fourth move. He advanced with purpose, shaping the center, reinforcing his position, building something stable, something that could not be undone easily. This was his domain, his strength. Emily's fourth move followed without pause. And this time, it did not disrupt the board in any obvious way. It did something else. It fit. Perfectly. Too perfectly. A quiet harmony that did not belong to coincidence. A man near the front shifted in his seat, his expression tightening as he watched the exchange unfold. Another leaned closer, whispering something barely audible, the tone no longer casual but alert. Victor felt it again, that same awareness from before, but stronger now, clearer. This was not randomness. This was design. His hand hovered over the board as he prepared his fifth move, but this time, there was no immediate decision. He paused, studying the position more carefully than he had in years. Every piece, every line, every possibility. The room seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, slowly, he made his move. Fifth move. Measured, controlled, safe, but purposeful. A move that closed doors, reduced risk, forced clarity. He leaned back slightly, watching her now, not the board. Waiting. Emily lowered her gaze to the pieces, her eyes moving across them in one smooth motion, as if reading something already written. Her fingers moved almost immediately. Fifth move. The piece settled into place with the same quiet certainty as before. And in that instant, Victor felt it. Not the full realization, not yet, but the beginning of it. A shift beneath the surface. Something aligning again. Too quickly, too cleanly. The room did not react immediately, but the tension deepened, spreading silently from one person to the next. Victor leaned forward again, his focus tightening, his confidence no longer returning, but transforming into something sharper, something more cautious. He was no longer playing a simple opponent. And somewhere deep in his mind, a thought began to form, slow but undeniable. He had not underestimated her once. He had underestimated her from the very beginning. Victor did not move immediately. For the first time since the second game began, time stretched between turns, not because he was uncertain of the rules, but because he understood something far more unsettling. Every move Emily made was not just correct. It was inevitable. He leaned closer to the board, his elbows now resting lightly on the table, his posture no longer composed for an audience, but anchored in concentration. The room had fallen completely silent again, but this silence was different from before. It was no longer curiosity. It was recognition, the kind that spreads slowly, quietly, until it becomes undeniable. Victor studied the position, tracing lines in his mind, projecting outcomes, testing variations. His sixth move needed to change the trajectory. It needed to disrupt whatever structure she was building. His fingers hovered over a knight, then shifted to a bishop, then paused again. Even his instincts, honed over decades, felt slightly out of reach, as if the board itself was no longer speaking the language he expected. Finally, he made his sixth move, a calculated attempt to break the symmetry, to introduce complexity, to force her into unfamiliar territory. It was a move designed not just to play, but to challenge. A quiet ripple passed through the audience, subtle but present, as if they could feel the shift in strategy even if they could not fully name it. Emily's eyes followed the movement, calm as ever, absorbing the change without visible reaction. And then, as if the move had been expected all along, she responded. Sixth move. Immediate. Effortless. And once again it fit. Not defensively. Not reactively. But seamlessly, as though it had already been part of the plan before Victor even considered his option. Victor's jaw tightened slightly. He did not look up this time. He did not need to. The board was telling him everything he needed to know. His seventh move came faster, sharper, a slight edge of urgency now threading through his precision. He advanced, pushing into her position, creating pressure, testing for weakness. This was where most opponents faltered. This was where experience mattered. Emily did not falter. Seventh move. Clean. Balanced. And with it, something became clearer. She was not defending. She was guiding. The realization settled slowly, like a weight that could not be ignored. Victor leaned back for a brief moment, his eyes lifting from the board as if to reset his perspective, but when he looked at Emily again, nothing had changed. She remained still, composed, her presence almost quiet enough to disappear, if not for the undeniable force of what she was doing. Around them, the audience remained motionless, but the tension had deepened into something almost tangible. One woman near the back pressed her lips together, her eyes fixed on the board, while another man adjusted his glasses, leaning forward with growing intensity. Victor returned his focus to the game, his eighth move forming with greater care, his confidence no longer guiding him, but something else. Respect. He placed the piece deliberately, reinforcing his structure, stabilizing what he could, preparing for a longer fight. This was no longer about winning quickly. It was about surviving the position. Emily's eighth move followed without pause. And this time, it was subtle, almost invisible to those who were not watching closely. But to Victor, it was unmistakable. A quiet shift that tightened the position, that removed options he had not even realized he was relying on. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in frustration, in understanding. The pattern was not random. It was precise, controlled, designed. He reached for his ninth move, slower now, each second stretching as he calculated deeper than he had at any point that evening. The room seemed to lean in with him, drawn into the gravity of the moment. When he finally placed the piece, there was no satisfaction in it, only necessity. Emily responded instantly. Ninth move. And with it, the shape of the game became clear in a way that could not be undone. Victor felt it before he fully saw it. The same sensation from the first game, but stronger now, undeniable. He was not catching up. He was following. And somewhere deep in that realization, a quiet truth emerged, one that no title, no reputation, no past victory could protect him from. He was no longer in control of this game. He had not been for several moves now. And for the first time in a very long time, Victor Hale understood what it meant to be completely outplayed. Victor stared at the board, but this time he was not searching for a winning line. He was searching for survival. The realization had settled in fully now, not as a sudden shock, but as a slow, undeniable truth that pressed against every calculation he attempted. He was behind, not by a single move, not by a small misstep, but by something deeper, something structural. Emily had not just responded to his strategy. She had anticipated it long before it ever appeared on the board. His 10th move came after a longer pause than any before it, his fingers moving carefully, deliberately, as he shifted a piece into a defensive position. It was not a move he would normally choose this early. It signaled something he had never shown in front of an audience like this. Restraint born from necessity. Around them, the silence tightened again, heavier now, as if the room itself understood the shift in power. Emily watched the move land, her expression unchanged, her posture still composed, almost detached from the weight of the moment that surrounded them. And then, without hesitation, she answered. 10th move. Smooth. Precise. And once again, it did not just respond. It restricted. Victor felt it immediately. The space he thought he had created closed again, quietly, efficiently, as if it had never truly been his to begin with. His eyes moved quickly across the board, mapping the position, testing variations, pushing deeper into lines he rarely needed to explore under pressure. His 11th move followed, slightly faster this time, driven not by confidence, but by urgency held carefully beneath control. He needed imbalance. He needed disruption. He needed something unpredictable. Emily gave him none of it. 11th move. Immediate. Balanced. And with it, another layer of the position locked into place. The audience remained silent, but the tension had evolved into something sharper, something that pulled attention tighter with every passing second. A man near the front leaned forward so far that his hands rested on the edge of the table beside him, his eyes fixed, unblinking. Someone else shifted in their seat, the soft sound of fabric against wood echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. Victor's 12th move came with a slight tightening of his jaw, his composure still intact on the surface, but beneath it, the pressure had begun to build. He pushed forward, committing to a line that opened the position, creating complexity, inviting risk. It was a decision he had made countless times before, often turning games in his favor when control began to slip. But this time, it felt different. Emily's response came as it always had. 12th move. Immediate. And as the piece settled, the effect was undeniable. The complexity he had introduced did not create chaos. It clarified her advantage. Victor leaned back slightly, just for a moment, his eyes lifting from the board as he exhaled slowly. The room remained silent, but now that silence carried something new. Not just recognition. Expectation. They were no longer watching to see if he would win. They were watching to see how this would end. He leaned forward again, his focus narrowing even further, his 13th move forming with careful precision. Every piece mattered now. Every square. Every possibility. He placed it down with quiet control, but there was no certainty in it, only necessity. Emily moved instantly. 13th move. And this time, the shift was unmistakable. Victor saw it clearly. Not just the position as it stood, but where it was going. The lines converging. The pressure building. The options disappearing one by one. His king, once distant from danger, now stood closer to something inevitable. His hand hovered again, But this time it did not move. For a brief moment, he simply stared at the board, his mind racing through every possible continuation, every escape, every counter. And for the first time since the game began, he could not find one that held. He looked up slowly, his eyes meeting Emily's once more. There was no triumph there, no challenge, just calm, just certainty. And in that quiet exchange, Victor understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer a question of if he would lose. It was only a matter of when she would decide to finish it. Victor did not reach for a piece right away. His hand remained still above the board, suspended between instinct and acceptance, as if the simple act of moving would confirm what he already knew but had not yet spoken. The position in front of him was no longer complex in the way chess usually was. It was clear, too clear. Every line he followed ended in the same place. Every variation collapsed into the same outcome. His 14th move, when it finally came, was quiet, controlled, and almost reluctant, a move not of ambition, but of delay. A final attempt to stretch time, to see if somewhere in the unfolding pattern there was still something unseen. The piece touched the board with a soft sound that seemed louder than it should have been in the silence. Emily's eyes followed it for a fraction of a second, and then she moved. 14th move. Immediate. And with that single motion, the structure tightened completely. It was no longer subtle. The path had narrowed to one direction, one conclusion, one inevitable finish. A faint shift moved through the audience, not a sound, not a whisper, but a collective understanding. People who had been leaning forward now held perfectly still. Even those who did not fully grasp the depth of the position could feel the finality settling in. Victor leaned back slightly, his eyes scanning the board again, slower now, not searching for answers, but confirming what was already there. His king, once safe, now stood confined, every escape square either controlled or about to be. His pieces, once active, now felt distant, disconnected, unable to coordinate in time. He inhaled slowly, the breath steady, measured, but carrying something heavier beneath it. His 15th move followed, but this time, it lacked the precision of earlier decisions. Not careless, not incorrect, but limited, constrained by a position that offered no real freedom. Emily responded as she always had. 15th move. No pause, no hesitation. And now, the shape of the end was unmistakable. Victor saw it clearly, not just the next move, but the sequence beyond it, the final steps that would bring everything to a close. His eyes lingered on the board, tracing the path she had built, move by move, each decision layering into the next with a clarity that could not be argued with. He looked up once more, meeting her gaze, and this time, there was no question left in his expression, only recognition. You saw this from the beginning, he said quietly, not as a challenge, but as a statement. Emily did not answer. She did not need to. The board had already spoken. The room remained completely silent now, the kind of silence that does not come from uncertainty, but from witnessing something undeniable. Victor lowered his gaze again, his hand moving slowly toward the board for what he knew would be his final meaningful move. 16th move. It was placed carefully, almost respectfully, as if acknowledging the position rather than trying to change it. Emily's response came without delay. 16th move. And with it, the final net closed. There was no escape left. No counterplay. No continuation that did not end in the same place. Victor's hand rested lightly on the table, his fingers no longer hovering, no longer searching. He stared at the board for a long moment, allowing the reality of it to settle completely. Around them, no one moved. No one spoke. The air itself seemed still. And then, slowly, Victor leaned back, his posture no longer that of a performer, no longer that of someone in control, but of someone who had reached the end of something he could not change. His voice, when it came, was quiet, steady, and without resistance. Go ahead, he said. Not a command, not a request, an acknowledgement. The game was no longer his to play. Across from him, Emily's gaze lowered to the board one final time, her hand moving forward with the same calm precision it had carried from the very first move. And as her fingers reached for the piece that would end it, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, suspended on the edge of a moment that had been building from the very beginning. Emily's fingers closed gently around the piece, her movement steady, unhurried, as if the outcome had already existed long before this moment arrived. She did not look at Victor. She did not look at the audience. Her attention rested only on the board, on the final position that had been building. With quiet precision from the very first move, the piece slid into place with a soft, almost delicate sound. And then, nothing. No immediate reaction. No applause. No whisper. Just silence. Deep, complete, and absolute. Victor did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the board, tracing the final position, not in disbelief anymore, but in full understanding. Every square controlled. Every path closed. Every possibility gone. His king stood exactly where it had been led, step by step, with no resistance left to offer. The realization settled into him fully now, not as a shock, but as something heavier, something quieter. Acceptance. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing just slightly, as if releasing a weight he had not known he was carrying. Around them, the room remained still, but the energy had changed again. This was no longer tension. This was recognition. A collective awareness that something rare had just unfolded before them. Victor finally leaned back in his chair, his gaze lifting from the board to Emily. There was no trace of arrogance left in his expression, no attempt to reclaim control of the moment. Only respect, clear and unmistakable. Checkmate, he said softly, the word carrying none of the resistance it once might have held. It was not defeat that filled his voice. It was acknowledgement. Emily lifted her eyes to meet his, her expression unchanged, calm, almost distant, as if this moment did not define her, as if it was simply one of many that had come before. For a brief second, the two of them held that silence together, not as opponents, but as something else entirely. Then Emily nodded once, a small, simple gesture, and leaned back slightly in her chair. No celebration, no explanation, just closure. A faint sound began to return to the room, not all at once, but gradually, like a breath being released after being held too long. Someone shifted in their seat. Another cleared their throat. And then, quietly, almost hesitantly, a few people began to clap. It was not loud, not overwhelming, but it spread, slowly, steadily, until the room filled with it. Not for spectacle, not for entertainment, but for something else. Recognition, respect. Victor stood up, adjusting his jacket out of habit, though the gesture no longer carried the same meaning it had before. He looked at Emily once more, his voice steady, sincere. "Thank you," he said. Two simple words, but they carried more weight than anything he had said that evening. Emily gave a slight nod in return, then rose from her seat. She did not linger. She did not wait for attention. She simply turned and began to walk back toward the edge of the room, toward the place where she had stood unnoticed not long ago. And as she moved through the crowd, people stepped aside, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper. Awareness. Respect. Victor remained where he was for a moment longer, his eyes following her path until she disappeared from view. Then he looked back at the board, at the final position that would stay with him far longer than any victory ever had. Because this time, it was not just a game he would remember. It was a lesson. And that day, in a room filled with expectation and certainty, something quiet and undeniable had revealed itself. Respect often reveals itself when you least expect it. If you enjoy stories that uncover truth, dignity, and hidden strength, do not forget to like and subscribe. The next story might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching.